Rimuru x Arifureta. Fragments of Soul to be the Strongest by Rimu_Kai. Chapter 7 Void Monarch. 12 days earlier it had taken 3 days for the expedition group to reach the surface. Captain Meld rushed to report everything to the king, the ambush, the behemoth, and most notably, Hajime Nagumo's supposed death. The students were still reeling from the incident, many of them refusing to continue their role in the war effort. After witnessing the sheer wrath Rimuru had unleashed upon the behemoth, they were left traumatized, unable to ignore the overwhelming power that had been displayed. Currently, the students were staying at an inn near Orcus Dungeon. Their rooms in the kingdom were not yet prepared, and, more importantly, no one dared move Rimuru. He had collapsed after his rampage, completely unconscious, and there was a lingering fear that if he awoke too soon, his fury would not have subsided. Some students even voiced concerns about what he might do if he found out Hajime had not been saved. 2 days later it had been 5 days since Hajime had fallen into the abyss, and Rimuru was still unconscious. However, there was finally a change. Kaori had awakened. Kaori's eyelids fluttered open as she slowly regained consciousness. The first thing she saw was Shizuku, sitting beside her with a worried expression. "Shizuku-chan." Kaori's voice was weak, hoarse from days of sleep. Shizuku's eyes widened in surprise before softening. "Kaori, thank goodness. Are you in any pain? Do you feel alright?" Kaori blinked slowly, trying to process her surroundings. "I don't feel any pain. But what are we doing here? Aren't we supposed to be in the dungeon?" And her voice trailed off, and her expression became distant. Shizuku immediately noticed Kaori was starting to recall the events of that fateful day. Her heart ached, knowing what was about to happen. Desperate to change the subject, she forced a smile and said, "Hey, Kaori, are you hungry? You've been asleep for 5 days. You should eat something." 5 days, Kaori murmured, furrowing her brows. Then, as if a fog had lifted, fragments of memories returned to her. "That's odd, by the way, I had a weird dream." Shizuku stiffened. "A dream?" Kaori nodded. "We were in Orcus Dungeon, and then, a behemoth appeared. It attacked us, and Nagumo-kun fell." Her voice wavered. Silence filled the room. Shizuku clenched her fists, knowing there was no stopping what would come next. Kaori's eyes widened as realization hit her. No, that wasn't a dream, was it? Her breathing grew uneven, and she quickly turned to Shizuku, desperation in her gaze. "Nagumo-kun is still alive, right? You guys saved him after I fainted, right? Tell me he's okay." Shizuku's heart shattered at those words. Unable to hold back any longer, she wrapped her arms around Kaori and pulled her into a tight embrace. "I'm sorry, Kaori," she whispered, her voice trembling. Hajime is gone. He fell into the abyss, with the behemoth." Kaori froze in her arms. Then, slowly, she pushed Shizuku away, her eyes wide with disbelief. No, that's a lie. You're lying, Shizuku-chan. You have to be lying." Shizuku shook her head, tears forming in her own eyes. "I wish I was. But it's the truth. We failed to save him. We couldn't do anything." No, that's not true. That can't be true." Kaori clutched her head, shaking violently. "Hajime-kun isn't dead. He can't be. I promised to protect him." Her voice broke into a sob, and she collapsed onto the bed, tears streaming down her face. I promised him I'd always be there. I told him he wouldn't be alone, but I." Her words turned into a wail of grief. Shizuku sat beside her, unable to do anything but hold her as she cried her heart out. It hurt. It hurt so much to see her best friend like this, breaking apart over someone who had never deserved the cruel fate forced upon him. Hajime had been kind, gentle, too good for this world. And now, he was gone, lost to the abyss. Kaori's cries filled the room, the weight of reality crushing down on her. "I should have been there. I should have stayed awake. I should have." "Kaori." Kaori looked up, her tear-streaked face filled with anguish. Shizuku took a deep breath, forcing herself to remain composed. "You loved Hajime, didn't you?" Kaori flinched, her lips trembling. I don't know. I never told him, but I wanted to. I wanted to tell him that I cared, that he wasn't alone, and now, it's too late." Shizuku placed a hand on Kaori's shoulder, her voice soft yet firm. Kaori, listen to me. I know this hurts. I know this is unbearable. But, you can't let it break you. Kaori shook her head. But he's gone, Shizuku-chan, he's gone, and I never even got to tell him. Shizuku took a deep breath before whispering, I loved Rimuru-san too. Kaori's eyes widened, stunned into silence. I never told him either, Shizuku admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. I admired him, even when everyone ignored him, even when they mocked him. He always stayed strong, even when it was painful. And now, his brother is gone. More tears slipped down Kaori's cheeks, Shizuku-chan. But Kaori, Shizuku continued, her grip tightening. I refuse to believe that this is the end. Hajime wasn't weak. He wasn't someone who would just die like that. If there's even the slightest chance that he's alive, then we have to believe in him. Kaori stared at her best friend, her heart clinging desperately to those words. Shizuku smiled softly. So let's keep believing, okay? Even if no one else does, we will. Kaori hiccuped, wiping her tears away. Her heart still ached, but for the first time since waking up, a small ember of hope sparked within her. She took a shaky breath and nodded. Yes, we'll believe in him. Shizuku nodded, pulling her into another hug. That's right. No matter what happens, you should not give up on him. As the night deepened, Kaori and Shizuku sat together, bound by their shared grief and unspoken love for Rimuru and Hajime. And though their hearts still ached, they refused to let despair consume them. 3 hours had passed since Kaori had regained consciousness. The room was silent except for the faint sounds of people walking through the halls outside. Suddenly, the door swung open, and Kuki Amanogawa and Kyutaro stepped inside. Their expressions were mixed, though neither seemed particularly thrilled to see Kaori awake. Ah, you're finally awake, Kaori, Kuki said, forcing a smile. How are you feeling? Kyutaro crossed his arms and scoffed. Yeah, took you long enough. We were beginning to think you'd sleep forever. Shizuku, who had been sitting beside Kaori the whole time, narrowed her eyes at their words. She wasn't in the mood for their usual arrogance, not after everything that had happened. Kaori sat up slowly, rubbing her head. I feel fine, I think. But, what happened to Rimuru-san? A heavy silence filled the room. No one wanted to be the one to break the news again. Finally, Shizuku spoke, her voice gentle yet firm. Kaori, after you collapsed, Rimuru-san also lost consciousness. He hasn't woken up since. Kaori's eyes widened. Rimuru-san is unconscious. Why? What happened to him? The healers have tried everything, Shizuku continued. But they can't figure out what's wrong with him. It's like he's in a deep sleep, beyond their reach. TCH. Maybe that's for the best, Kuki muttered, leaning against the wall. Kaori turned to him sharply. What? Kyutaro shrugged. Yeah, I mean, why should we care? He was always an annoyance anyway. Shizuku's eyes flared with anger, and she immediately stood up. Annoying? Is that seriously what you think after everything that's happened? Her voice was laced with fury. He is our classmate. Our friend. How dare you talk about him like that? Kuki scoffed. Friend? Did you see what he did to the behemoth? That wasn't the action of a human, Shizuku. That was a monster in human skin. Shizuku clenched her fists. Oh, then tell me, what would you have done in his place? What would you have done if your younger brother was killed before your eyes? Kuki flinched, but he quickly tried to regain his composure. I control myself. I wouldn't go on a rampage like some beast. Shizuku laughed bitterly. Control yourself. Don't make me laugh, Kuki. You have no idea what it means to lose someone important to you. If you think suppressing your emotions in a situation like that is strength, then you don't have a heart. The room fell into silence. Kuki and Kyutaro had no response to that. Even they couldn't deny the raw pain that had been in Rimuru's eyes before he lost consciousness. Kaori, who had been listening quietly, suddenly spoke up. I want to see Rimuru-san. I want to try healing him too. Shizuku sighed. No, Kaori. You just woke up, you need to rest first. Kaori frowned but eventually nodded. Fine. Shizuku then turned to Kuki and Kyutaro. You two, leave. I don't want either of you here. Kuki scowled. Excuse me, you heard me. Get out. I don't need your negativity around Kaori right now, Shizuku snapped. Kyutaro clicked his tongue. Whatever. Call us if something happens. That won't be necessary, Shizuku said coldly. With that, Kuki and Kyutaro left, slamming the door behind them. Once they were gone, Kaori sighed. Shizuku, why were you so harsh on them? Shizuku hesitated before answering. I have a feeling that they don't actually care that Hajime is gone. It's like they wanted this outcome. Like they wanted both Hajime and Rimuru dead. Kaori's eyes widened in shock. What? That can't be true, right? Shizuku shook her head. I don't know for sure, but I won't take any chances. She placed a hand on Kaori's shoulder. For now, just rest. Gather your strength. Kaori hesitated but eventually nodded. All right. She laid back down, staring at the ceiling. I hope Rimuru-san wakes up soon. Shizuku looked at her sleeping friend and then glanced at the window, her heart heavy. So do I. 5 days later the days dragged on in the small inn near the Orcus dungeon, and the atmosphere grew heavier with each passing moment. It had been nearly 2 weeks since the battle, and Rimuru had yet to wake up. Meld, the knight commander, had returned after reporting the events to the king and informed everyone that as soon as Rimuru regained consciousness, they would all head to the capital. Despite their fears, most of the students remained hopeful, waiting anxiously for Rimuru to awaken. However, not everyone shared this sentiment. Kuki, Kyutaro, and Daisuke were among those who seemed indifferent, if not outright hostile toward Rimuru. Daisuke, in particular, was acting strangely, but for now, the others chose to ignore it. Inside Rimuru's room, Rimuru lay motionless on the bed, his body unnaturally still. His black hair is a mess, cascading over the pillow, and his pale skin looked almost lifeless. 4 healers stood around him, their hands glowing as they continuously cast healing magic. Kaori, though exhausted, persisted in assisting them, her face a mixture of desperation and determination. The entire group of students who had entered the dungeon stood around the room, watching anxiously. Kuki crossed his arms and sighed. This is pointless. We've been wasting our time on him for too long. Kyutaro scoffed. Yeah, we should just leave him. He's not waking up. A sharp tension filled the air. Shizuku's grip on her sword tightened as she glared at them with unrestrained fury. If you say another word, I swear I will cut you down where you stand. Silence fell upon the room, and some of the students shivered at the cold rage in Shizuku's voice. One of the students hesitated before speaking. But, do you really think he'll wake up? It's been so long. Another added, maybe his body is broken beyond repair. Even the best healers can't do anything. Kaori's hands trembled as she channeled her magic into Rimuru. Please, Rimuru-san, wake up, she whispered. Shizuku stepped closer and placed a reassuring hand on her shoulder. Don't overdo it, Kaori. You'll drain yourself. Kaori nodded weakly, but she refused to stop. Within Rimuru's mind, a sultry, mocking voice echoed through the void. My master is still undergoing evolution. I know you despise being a mere fragment of someone else. Allow me to mold you into your own individual, separate from that god. The unseen voice belonged to Azra, the mistress of knowledge. Though Rimuru was unconscious, her words carried the weight of destiny itself. Then, a new voice, one of absolute authority, resounded in the void. Notice, individual Rimuru Nagumo has evolved from fallen hero to void monarch. Successful. Azra chuckled darkly. There you go, my beloved foolish master. You will thank me later. Back in reality, an ominous shift occurred. Without warning, the golden glow of healing magic flickered and vanished. Gasps of shock filled the room as the healers stepped back in alarm. My magic. It's gone. One of them exclaimed. I don't understand. It's like something is consuming it. Another healer stammered. Kaori let out a choked breath, staggering backward. A powerful wave of unseen energy pressed down on her chest, nearly making her faint. Shizuku caught her just in time. Kaori. What's wrong? Shizuku asked, concern evident in her tone. Kaori's eyes were wide with fear. I sense something. Something overwhelmingly dark, something demonic. The other students looked at each other in confusion, not understanding what was happening. Kuki frowned, stepping forward. Is this some kind of trick? Maybe he's turning into a monster. Kyutaro nodded. Yeah, this feels unnatural. We should be prepared. A sudden surge of energy erupted from Rimuru's body. A dark purple aura poured from him, filling the room with an oppressive, suffocating presence. The temperature seemed to drop, and for a moment, the light dimmed as if the very concept of illumination was being devoured. Then, just as quickly, the aura shifted, turning blood red, violent, monstrous. Meld's expression turned grim as he stepped between Rimuru and the students. Everyone, stay back. This aura, it's not normal. It's the kind of presence you'd feel from a high-ranking monster. I don't know what's happening, but be ready in case we need to defend ourselves. The students murmured in panic. He's dangerous, right? One of them asked. We should restrain him before. Suddenly, Rimuru sat up. Gasps filled the room as everyone instinctively took a step back. Kuki and Kyutaro tensed, hands reaching for their weapons, their expressions betraying their inner thoughts. They were prepared to get rid of Rimuru right then and there. The red aura surrounding Rimuru slowly receded into his body. His previously blue eyes had turned a piercing blood red, filled with an unsettling intelligence and raw power. The long black hair he once had was gone, replaced by pure silvery white strands that shimmered in the dim light. Meld's expression hardened as he raised a hand. Stay alert. We don't know if he's still himself. The room was frozen in tense silence, all eyes on Rimuru. Rimuru slowly blinked, his newly crimson eyes adjusting to the dim lighting of the room. His long, silvery white hair cascaded down his back, starkly contrasting with his once black locks. The oppressive aura that had filled the room had dissipated, but the tension remained thick. Kaori and Shizuku stepped closer hesitantly. Shizuku, her normally calm expression betraying a flicker of concern, spoke first. Rimuru, are you okay? Before he could answer, Kuki interjected, his voice laced with contempt. Stay away from that monster. His words hung in the air, heavy with accusation. Rimuru turned his gaze toward the so-called hero, his lips curling into an amused yet menacing smile. Who do you think you're calling a monster, you foolish hero? His voice was smooth, yet the underlying malice sent shivers through the gathered students. Kuki's expression darkened, but he took an involuntary step back. Kyutaro, standing beside him, clenched his fists and scoffed. You really think you're still one of us? After that display, who in their right mind would trust you? The students murmured amongst themselves, their fear and uncertainty evident. Meld, stepping forward, placed a firm hand on his sword hilt. Boy, do you have control over yourself? Rimuru exhaled through his nose, the irritation in his crimson gaze briefly replaced by amusement. Yes, I am in control. He then turned toward Kaori and Shizuku, his expression softening slightly. Now, would one of you mind telling me why everyone is gathered here? Kaori hesitated before shaking her head. It doesn't matter right now. Just rest. No need, Rimuru interrupted, standing up fluidly. His towering presence exuded power. I'm going to find Hajime. The room fell into dead silence. Shizuku and Kaori instinctively reached for his arm. Stay here, Shizuku urged. You just woke up. Eat something first. Kaori nodded in agreement, concern etched across her face. Please, Rimuru-san, rest a little. Meld sighed, lowering his weapon. They're right. You need to recover. We're leaving for the kingdom tomorrow morning, so rest up. Meld turned to the students. All of you, prepare yourselves for departure. Dismissed. Most of the students shuffled out of the room, eager to escape the heavy atmosphere. Only Kaori, Shizuku, Kuki, and Kyutaro remained, along with Rimuru. As the door closed, Kaori let out a relieved sigh. I'm so glad you're awake, Rimuru-san. We were so worried. Shizuku crossed her arms, her serious expression belying the quiet relief in her eyes. You had us scared. Don't pull that stunt again. Rimuru smirked at her. What, did I miss you that much? Shizuku turned away, a faint blush dusting her cheeks. Don't flatter yourself. Kaori giggled softly. You haven't changed. Before the moment could settle, Kuki stepped forward, his jaw tight. This isn't something to joke about. You lost control, and we don't know if you'll do it again. Kyutaro sneered. Maybe it's better if you didn't wake up at all. Rimuru's playful smirk faded, his crimson eyes sharpening. Care to repeat that? Kyutaro crossed his arms defiantly. Face it, you and your brother are freaks. Hajime's dead, and maybe that's for the best. You're no different from the monsters in the dungeon. A chilling silence filled the room. Then, in an instant, the temperature seemed to drop. Rimuru's presence darkened, and an unseen pressure weighed heavily on everyone. Kuki and Kyutaru stiffened, their instincts screaming danger. Rimuru took a slow step forward, his voice dangerously calm. Say that again, and your head will roll on the ground before you even realize it. Kyutaru took a sharp breath, his face paling. Kuki clenched his fists. Threatening your own classmates. Rimuru tilted his head. A monster. Fine. Then let me show you just how monstrous I can be. A flicker of dark energy crackled around his fingertips, the remnants of the terrifying aura from earlier threatening to resurface. Enough. Shizuku's voice cut through the tension, her hand gripping Rimuru's wrist. Don't give them what they want. Kaori grabbed his other arm. Please, Rimuru-san, don't fight them. Rimuru inhaled deeply, then exhaled, the crackling energy fading. He clicked his tongue in annoyance before rolling his shoulders. Fine. Shizuku released his wrist, visibly relieved. Thank you. Kyutaru scowled but said nothing more. Kuki, though still glaring, didn't push the argument further. Kaori smiled softly. Now, rest for a bit, okay. Rimuru sighed, rubbing his temples. You two are really persistent, huh? Shizuku smirked. We're not leaving until you agree. He shook his head, amused despite himself. All right, I'll rest. Satisfied, Kaori and Shizuku finally stepped away. As they left the room, Rimuru leaned back against the bed, exhaling slowly. His crimson eyes flickered, his mind still reeling from everything. The journey wasn't over yet. And he would find Hajime, no matter what. Night had fallen over the kingdom, casting long shadows across the castle. Rimuru stood in his assigned room, slipping on a sleeveless white shirt and loose black pants. He tightened his belt and reached for his katana, the blade humming faintly in his grip. He glanced at the door and sighed. If I walk through there, someone will notice, he muttered to himself. As he weighed his options, a familiar voice rang in his mind, Azura, his ever-sarcastic ultimate skill. Oh, sneaking out in the dead of night. How rebellious. Let me guess, you're off to save your precious little brother. Azura teased. Rimuru rolled his eyes. Yeah, and, you think I'd leave Hajime alone down there? Azura chuckled darkly. What if he's already dead? You planning to have a dramatic breakdown? Rimuru's expression darkened, but his voice remained steady. Then I'll drag him back from hell myself. Azura hummed in amusement. Now that's the kind of answer I expect from my foolish little master. Ignoring her, Rimuru walked over to the window. He pushed it open and took in the cool night air. Without hesitation, he jumped, landing soundlessly on the ground below. He straightened and muttered, all right, let's find Hajime. As he walked through the quiet streets toward the Orcus dungeon, he noticed something strange. His body felt lighter. Faster. Azura, he asked, why do I feel different? Ah, you finally noticed. Azura sounded pleased. Your evolution. Rimuru's eyes narrowed. What do you mean? I can't evolve, I'm just a fragment of Rimuru Tempest. That was true before, Azura admitted. But not anymore. You've changed. You are no longer bound to your former self. You are Rimuru Nagumo, an existence separate from Rimuru Tempest. Rimuru came to a halt. He clenched his fists, processing Azura's words. So, I'm free. Completely. You're no longer a lost fragment. You're your own being. A slow smile crept onto Rimuru's face. That's good to hear. Oh, are you actually showing gratitude? How rare. Yeah, thanks for doing this for me, Azura. Anything for my foolish little master, she responded smugly. Rimuru shook his head with a smirk. All right, show me my status. Azura's voice echoed in his mind. Here you go. Name, Rimuru Nagumo. Age, 17th before reincarnation. 190 million. Race. Class. Void Monarch. Level. Cannot be counted due to class Void Monarch. EP value. 50 million for readers. Strength. 1000. Vitality. Infinite. Defense. 1000. Agility. 1000. Magic. 200k plus. Magic defense. Absolute nullifies almost all magic except draconic power. Ultimate skills. Azura, mistress of knowledge, a dark and twisted counterpart to Raphael, manipulative and sarcastic. Guides Rimuru through painful, indirect means to ensure his growth. Void King Beelzebub, a fusion of Gluttony King Beelzebub and Void God Azathoth, granting Rimuru the ability to consume, erase, and distort reality itself. Magic and abilities. Demonic magic, enhances and corrupts normal magic. Demonic spirit magic, fuses demonic energy with spirit-based abilities. Demonic holy magic, a fusion of divine and demonic forces. Spatial manipulation, controls dimensions and teleports instantly. Time distortion, can slow down or speed up time. Reality warping, alters reality through Void King Beelzebub. Existence erasure, can erase anything completely. Resistances. Absolute resistance, except for draconic power. Absolute nullification, except for draconic power. Rimuru whistled. That's a big jump. Well, Azra said smugly, your evolution triggered after devouring Behemoth. Rimuru's smirk widened. Good. Then let's not waste any time. With that, he quickened his pace, the dungeon entrance looming ahead. Rimuru halted a few meters away from the entrance of the Orcus dungeon, his sharp eyes scanning the dim surroundings. Just as he was about to take a step forward, Azra's voice echoed in his mind. Master, it seems a few individuals are blocking your path. Rimuru sighed, already expecting trouble. Who are they? Azra chuckled darkly. That so-called hero boy and his friends. Oh, and Shizuku and Kaori are with them as well. He ran a hand through his hair, exhaling in exasperation. Looks like I have to talk before I go. Turning his gaze toward the darkness, he called out, you guys can step out from your hiding places. From behind the dungeon door, Kaori, Shizuku, Kuki, and Kyutaru stepped into view. Shizuku took a step forward, concern evident in her eyes. Rimuru-san, you have to come back with us. This is dangerous. Kaori nodded. I know Hajime is still alive, but you shouldn't go alone. We can help. Rimuru's gaze softened for a moment before hardening again. You guys don't understand. Let me go. Kuki, his arms crossed, scoffed. You're the one who doesn't understand, Rimuru. Rimuru raised a brow. Oh, and what exactly am I failing to understand? Kuki clenched his fists. This is war, and I am the hero. You have to do as I say and help finish this war. Kyutaru nodded. You're part of the hero's team, it's your duty. Rimuru laughed, his expression filled with amusement and scorn. Hero, you say. You don't understand what war is. I've fought more battles and waged more wars than any of you. Kyutaru frowned. What are you talking about? We were just summoned to this world. Rimuru's smirk widened. You were summoned to this world. I lived in another world. That's the difference between us. Kaori and Shizuku looked at each other in confusion and worry, but before they could interject, Kuki took a step forward, his anger flaring. Enough of your nonsense. If you won't listen, I'll make you. Rimuru cracked his knuckles. I was hoping you'd say that. Now, get out of my way, or I'm afraid the hero boy will get hurt. Kuki gritted his teeth. That's enough. He activated Limit Break, his body surging with energy. His holy sword radiated divine power as he shouted, Holy Slash. Kyutaru followed up by casting Flame Lance, a massive spear of fire hurtling toward Rimuru. Rimuru didn't flinch. Instead, he raised his katana, a dark aura enveloping the blade. Void Slash. A single flick of his sword sent a wave of black energy forward. It effortlessly swallowed Kuki's holy slash, shattering it like glass. Kuki barely had time to react as the force sent him skidding back, his arms trembling. What? Kuki's eyes widened in shock. Meanwhile, Kyutaru's flame lance was countered with hellfire, a deep black flame that devoured the attack in an instant before shooting forward. Kyutaru barely managed to dodge, the heat singing his uniform as he rolled on the ground, panic evident in his face. Rimuru took a step forward, unfazed. Is that all? The so-called hero and his ally can't even land a proper hit. Kuki growled, forcing himself to stand. His body still surged with Limit Break, meaning he should be stronger than ever, but even now, he was being overwhelmed. Impossible. How can you overpower me even with Limit Break? Rimuru tilted his head, a mocking grin playing on his lips. Limit Break. You think that makes you invincible? Sorry to break it to you, but compared to me, that power boost is nothing. Kuki roared in frustration, charging forward again. He swung his sword with all his might, trying to land a clean hit. Rimuru dodged with ease, his movements fluid. Kuki's blade sliced through the air uselessly as Rimuru's katana clashed against his, creating a shockwave that sent dust flying. The sheer force of the impact nearly made Kuki lose his grip. Damn you! Kuki swung again and again, but each strike was met with a precise counter from Rimuru. It was like fighting an insurmountable wall. Kyutaru, gritting his teeth, tried to cast Explosion, hoping to catch Rimuru off guard. But before he could complete the chant, Rimuru appeared before him in an instant. Too slow. A backhanded slap sent Kyutaru flying into a nearby rock. He groaned in pain, coughing up blood. Kuki saw this and charged again, attempting another holy slash. Rimuru sighed, his patience wearing thin. Enough. Before Kuki could react, Rimuru's katana slashed diagonally, sending a powerful shockwave that shattered the ground beneath them. Kuki was sent crashing backward, his limit break finally wearing off. He coughed violently, struggling to stand. Rimuru pointed his blade at him. I told you to move. Now look at you. Weak, beaten, and humiliated. This is the so-called hero. Pathetic. Kaori and Shizuku rushed forward, standing between Rimuru and the defeated duo. That's enough. Please, Rimuru. Kaori pleaded, her voice desperate. Shizuku nodded. We don't want to lose anyone else. Rimuru stared at them for a moment before sighing. He sheathed his katana and turned away. Be thankful they're still breathing. Next time, I won't be so lenient. With that, Rimuru stepped past them, his eyes fixed on the darkness beyond the dungeon entrance. The heavy silence that followed his victory was soon broken by the groans of Kuki and Kyutaru as they stirred from their almost conscious state. Kaori immediately knelt beside them, her hands glowing with a soft, green light as she began healing their injuries. You guys really don't know when to quit, she muttered, concern lacing her voice. Kuki clenched his fists as he sat up, his pride bruised more than his body. We have to stop Rimuru. If he goes unchecked, he could become a danger to us all. Kyutaru, still wincing from his burns, nodded. But what should we do? We couldn't even land a proper hit on him. Kaori turned to them, her usually warm expression now filled with disappointment. What's wrong with you two? She asked sharply. Before either of them could respond, she shifted her attention to Shizuku, who was watching Rimuru's retreating form. You want to go with him, don't you? Kaori asked knowingly. Shizuku hesitated for a moment before nodding. Yes. Kaori smiled softly. Then go. Don't make the same mistake I did. Shizuku's eyes widened in surprise, tears gathering at the corners. She suddenly embraced Kaori. Thank you, Kaori. You're the best friend I could ever ask for. Kaori chuckled, hugging her back. Just promise me, if you find Hajime, bring him back. Shizuku nodded, wiping her tears. I promise. Then go, Kaori urged. Don't keep him waiting. Shizuku turned and sprinted toward Rimuru, leaving the others behind. Kuki reached out as if to stop her. Wait, Shizuku. Rimuru is a monster. You can't trust him. But she ignored him, her determination unwavering as she ran to the one she had always secretly loved. Rimuru. She called out, her voice echoing in the cavern. Rimuru stopped just before entering the dungeon, turning slightly to see Shizuku running toward him. What is it now? He asked, raising an eyebrow. I'm coming with you, she declared firmly. Rimuru sighed. No, you're not. This is dangerous. Shizuku crossed her arms. Nope, I'm not in any danger at all. You know why? Because I'm with the most dangerous person here. She stepped closer, placing a hand on his chest. I'm coming with you. No excuses. Rimuru exhaled in exasperation. But Shizuku. She pressed a finger against his lips, silencing him. I said no excuses. He chuckled, shaking his head. Fine. But don't complain if things get difficult. Shizuku smiled. Sure, why not? Let's go find your brother and bring him back to Kaori, shall we? Rimuru smirked. Whatever. With that, the two of them entered the dungeon together, the massive gates closing behind them with a resounding boom. Kaori watched as Shizuku disappeared into the dungeon with Rimuru. A bittersweet feeling settled in her chest. She was happy, finally, her best friend had found a way to be with the one she loved. But at the same time, sadness crept in. Would she ever get the same chance with Hajime? She still believed he was dead, and the thought tore at her heart. Meanwhile, Kuki clenched his fists, his nails digging into his palms. His rage boiled within him. First, Rimuru had humiliated him. Now, he had taken Shizuku away. Damn it. He muttered under his breath. I swear, I'll make Rimuru pay for this. Kyutaru shared his sentiment. That bastard. I'll never forgive him. Next time, we won't lose. But for now, all they could do was watch as Rimuru and Shizuku disappeared into the depths of the dungeon. Their figures swallowed by the encroaching darkness. To be continued.